Hello, my name is Billy Goodworth. Welcome to my workshop. Here at Bill's workshop, I create everything from metal gates to fine woodworking tables, the upcycling of old and tired materials and products into something new and give them a new life. I suppose I've really started and got hooked from a very young age, making small things like bird houses and bird boxes. As I sort of developed my jobs and my life, I slowly honed what I want to do into the production of bespoke goods, and it varies so much. You know, I'm not someone who just makes the same thing over and over. I don't just make shelving every day, and that really what attracts me into this job. It's such a wide variety of things. Every commission is slightly different. Everything I make is for a different purpose. My latest project, I think, pips the post as my favourite, which is it's 200-year-old wood, 200-year-old oak beams from a manger, which I didn't really realise was an actual thing, but it's basically a food trough for a horse or a cow on a farm. And I got it from this restoration and reclamation yard. When I bought it, they were 60mm thick, absolutely tired, covered in woodworm, covered in muck and paint. When I restored them, planed them, made them into the shelving, the colours that came through from this old wood were just unfathomably wonderful. Combined with some hand fabricated brackets, which include plugs on the end to cover the tube steel, which had hand planished copper, so you got a real nice glint in the light, and that was for a flat in London, just to be able to use for both practical storage and so that there was a little bit of extra homeliness and warmth in their property. I think I'm more naturally drawn to the material of wood. I think just because of the colours that you can get from different species of wood, and the result you can get can vary so much that I would say that is slightly more my favourite material. However, combining the two is my ideal scenario. Like these shelves I've made, both have a huge element of metalwork and fabrication, but the wood is the real story of the piece. The biggest challenge, once you've got a commission or an idea, it's fantastic, but having to get to the place where you can easily get commissions one after the other, that's difficult. Making things to any maker in any field, even if it's a challenge, you can always find a way around it. But to be able to have the challenge brought to you in the first place can sometimes be the most difficult thing. The best way to get clients is the old-fashioned way to do it, is always word of mouth. If you do something for somebody, they pass it on to their friends, their family, and they get in contact. That is purely through the friendliness, the professionalism of your work, and through the quality of the product you're providing for them. If you give them something that's decent, then they're going to tell their family, yeah, it's decent. If you provide them something which is truly exceptional, which goes above and beyond what you ask them to create, then actually, at the end of the day, they're going to do the advertising for you. They're going to do it non-stop whenever somebody comes around the house and goes, wow, look at that lamp, that is simply fantastic. I need one of those. Where did you get it? Who made it? That's where you come into play. More modern techniques, websites, leaflets, social media is all very, very important to keep your name out there, keep you in other people's minds. Social media is fantastic for that. If you can create enough posts, and if they're good enough and popular enough, if the photos are good, then people see what you've created. They see the passion you've got for what you do, and they're going to come to you when they have the idea that they would like something new in their life. Middle line between what the client wants exactly and where my creativity and the freedom of making that piece comes together to meet in both worlds. Everybody's been there when you're the client and you know exactly what you want down to the finest detail. And sometimes that works perfectly. Sometimes that's more difficult to create than you first thought as the client. it might incur extra costs, it might be more difficult to produce, those materials might not be able to structurally hold in that configuration and that shape. So the medium between the two is actually the information you can provide the customer to change and advise their opinion on what the best outcome is, both from an aesthetic point of view, a practical and a functional point of view. If you give somebody exactly what they want, then that's amazing. If you can advise them on something which might change their outlook slightly and give them an even better product that's going to last much longer, it's going to be more practical, more functional. Actually, one of the ideas you put in there means it gives it an alternative function as well. So you end up with, you're pleasing the client, you're testing your abilities as a creator, and at the end of the day, you've given them this beautiful product that they knew they wanted, but they didn't know it could be such a well-rounded item. So the challenges between large companies manufacturing goods, manufacturing furniture, products to sell through multiple outlets, compared to a small workshop in the middle of Berkshire producing a thousandth of the number of items every month, every year, compared to these big chains. Yes, of course it's a challenge, but I think in recent years the need for art in people's homes is never bigger. Everybody would rather something slightly more unique and handmade, completely bespoke just for them, rather than a table that everybody on the street owns. So sourcing materials is it can be a big difficulty, it can be a big challenge, and it can be extremely fun. Wood, there are some excellent wood merchants out there that specialise in exotic and UK-based sustainably sourced hardwoods. I always go to those places first if I know exactly where the wood has come from. If I know that it's from Britain, if I know that it's from Scotland, it doesn't have a big carbon footprint, I will always go for that wood over the imported wood. I go to reclamation yards to source a lot of wood, a lot of oak, where with oak you only get a very small few centimetres on the top, which may rot over time, but underneath that, if you can plane it back, if you can work it back, then often it's so hard and so dense that it's like working a fresh plank of wood. And again, it's recycling that piece of wood, so you're not having to cut down more trees to be able to produce the item you wish to produce. With metal, again, unfortunately most metal these days is made in China, but being able to recycle bits, saving smaller sections once you're done with a commission or a project, to save that for future means you're not throwing away excess material and you can always reuse it another time. So as much as possible, I'll reuse materials, and I'll go to second-hand yards, salvage yards, reclamation yards to source those materials. Reclaimed products, it's more difficult to think about where you're going with them until you have them in front of you. If I'm at a salvage yard, a reclamation yard, and I can see the project, I can see the product, what's going to happen with it, then I know that I can create this into a wonderful item. When I sell my goods, often I like to sell in person. I do a little bit of selling online through social media, through websites. However, in person is always nice when you can get a real feel for where your product is going, and you can also build a slight relationship with that specific client. From that, you may then get commissions, you may then get further work. Often salvage fairs can be very good as well, where you're slightly more unique compared to the seller of reclaimed goods. You have a slightly more different take on it. It's also good because you can source materials while you're there. You can sell something that you have restored and remade and that has a new purpose from what it originally was. I think, especially in recent years, maybe the last decade or just a bit more, I think there's a massive resurgence for both crafts, particularly blacksmithing, where through social media there's been a lot of advertising for the craft, for the skill inadvertently, where people have been doing it, it's been videoed, and once it's shared online and people realise the amount of time, physical and mental skill that goes into creating something from a bar of solid steel is immense. My favourite blacksmithing tool, I think I would have to choose one of the oldest tools that I have, which is this old long-handled ball-peen hammer. Mainly because it has a longer handle, it means you can exert more force, it means you can hold it in many different configurations, and the closer you hold it to the hammer head enables you to do more detailed work, more controlled, whereas if you hold it further down the handle, you can get more power from the swing. Also, I found this hammer in, oddly, the bottom of my greenhouse, and when I brought it to the master blacksmith I was apprenticing with at the time as a tool, when I was literally just beginning to get into the skill, he said this is a genuine blacksmithing tool. The long handle, the shape of the head, it is and was at some point in life a traditional blacksmithing tool, and you should use it as such, and I have ever since. So it's pretty worn out, it's pretty beat up, but it does a mighty fine job every single day. My favourite woodworking tool would be this plane, an Old Faithful plane, which it's nothing special, if I'm honest. It's a bog standard good plane. I keep it sharp, I use it again almost every day in the workshop, but I found it when myself and my father were clearing out part of the garage, and at the back there was this box just sat there, and I saw it had Faithful written on it, and I thought maybe there's a tool inside. So we grabbed it and had a look, and inside was this brand new plane, absolutely brand new, not a nick on the blade, not a scrap of sawdust, had never been used. And I asked my dad, no, is this yours? And he said, no, that was your granddad's, but he obviously never used it. So it was wonderful when I was just getting started to find this tool that my granddad had that he never really used, and it was really nice. It was like a gift from him to me, a brand new tool just as I was starting out. The most useful tool I would probably say is a traditional Japanese saw. Now these are amazing pieces of equipment, and if you're a woodworker you know how useful they are. The blade is traditionally about 1 millimeter thick, is polished in the center so that it doesn't stick when you're sawing wood. The fact that it has no real spine, no enlargement anywhere, means you can cut large depths of wood. The two different styles of teeth on it, the fine ones here for cutting across the grain, whereas the large ones more of a traditional rip saw for cutting long ways or through very soft wood. It enables you to cut 90 degrees, perfect angles, with some challenge, but with relative ease compared to a lot of other hand saws and sometimes even mechanical and powered methods. And it leaves you with an astonishing finish. It is a highly, I would almost describe it as a sensitive piece of equipment, where it's so accurate and it has such a precise function, which has been produced for many hundreds of years in Japan, and they've got the tool so perfectly right that it does its singular job with such precise function that once you've got one and once you use a traditional Japanese saw, you'll never want to go back. You'll never want a different saw again. Most people presume it's called Bill's Workshop because it's named after myself. It's actually called that because the original workshop was my granddad's summer house. He sort of converted that into a workspace so that he could make things for the house and the garden and that sort of thing. Wasn't a professional woodworker, but as that generation did, he used his hands well and he could make anything he wanted and needed to. When I started and got into it all those years ago, I was walking into his space, his tools still on the bench, jars of nails that he'd saved for projects, and to sort of honour that space that he gave me, I called it Bill's Workshop, and it's a name I still use and hopefully will always use. I've been Billy Goodworth. Thank you for joining me in my workshop.